I was halfway through my mother's roast chicken when my phone buzzed. A single message flashed across the screen. Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents. No name. No context. Just those words glowing on my screen and my heart stopped cold. For a second, I thought it was some sick joke, maybe a wrong number. But then another text followed. You're in danger, Mia. Do not let them see you panic. That's when the fork slipped from my hand, clinking against the porcelain plate. My parents both looked up. My dad raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? I smiled, stiff and forced. Yeah, just work. He nodded and went back to cutting his steak, but my mom's eyes lingered sharp, curious, knowing. I'd always been close to her. Or at least, I thought I was. Growing up, Mom was my best friend. She'd braid my hair before school, cheer the loudest at my choir recitals, and call me her brightest light. Dad was quieter, the kind of man who showed love through rules and expectations. Our family dinners were supposed to be sacred, one night a week where phones stayed face down and everyone reconnected. But tonight, something was off. The air felt heavier, like there was a secret sitting between the mashed potatoes and the bottle of wine. The third message came as I reached for my glass of water. They're not who you think they are. My throat went dry. My eyes darted between them, my parents, smiling, chatting casually about the neighbors' vacation plans, and that message. Not who I think they are. I wanted to ask, who are you? Or what's going on, but my fingers were trembling too much. I locked my phone under the table and forced myself to breathe. Maybe it was a scam. Or one of those prank texts that make you paranoid. But something deep inside me, that quiet, gut-level instinct that whispers before logic can argue, told me this wasn't random. And it wasn't a joke. Sweetheart, you okay? Mom's voice cut through my thoughts, soft and careful. You've barely touched your food. Just not hungry, I said quickly. Dad's tone was firmer. You've been distracted all week, Mia. Everything fine at work? Work. Right. The perfect cover. I nodded. Yeah, just deadlines. He studied me, that silent, assessing look he always gave when he thought I was hiding something. For once, he wasn't wrong. But I wasn't ready to admit that I had no idea what I was hiding from. Dinner dragged on. Every time I thought about standing up and leaving, I pictured their confused faces. My mother's hand reaching out, her voice asking, "Where are you going, honey?" How was I supposed to explain that an anonymous message told me to run away from my own parents? It sounded insane. So I stayed seated. And that's when I noticed a faint vibration against the table. Not from my phone. From Dad's. The screen lit up briefly, and for a split second, I saw the preview of a message before it disappeared. It was a name. A name that made my stomach twist. Ethan. My ex. The same man who'd ghosted me 3 months ago after dating for nearly 2 years. The same man who'd blocked me on everything, no explanation, no closure. Why was my dad getting messages from him? My heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. Mom laughed at something Dad said, and the sound felt foreign, almost rehearsed. I excused myself to grab some water, but really, I needed to think. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the glass in the kitchen. And that's when I saw my mom's phone on the counter, screen face up, unlocked. Curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at it, just for a second. The most recent message read. We're almost ready. Just make sure she stays calm tonight. My breath caught. The contact name? E. I froze. Could it be Ethan again? Before I could scroll further, Mom's voice echoed from the dining room. Mia? Everything okay in there? I shoved the phone aside and grabbed my glass. Yeah, just getting water. She smiled as I sat back down, but I could have sworn there was a flicker of relief in her eyes. Another text buzzed my phone under the table. They know I warned you. Leave now. Trust me. My pulse spiked. I didn't move. Across the table, my parents exchanged a quick glance, the kind that happens between people who share a secret they don't want the third person to know. My mom reached out, touched my hand gently. You know we love you, right? Her fingers were warm, but something in her tone chilled me to the bone. I smiled, trying to look calm. Of course. But inside, every nerve in my body screamed the same thing. Something's wrong. That night, when I finally excused myself to go upstairs, I locked my bedroom door, sat on my bed, and stared at my phone. Another text came through immediately. They're not your parents, Mia. Pack a bag and leave. I'll explain everything once you're safe. I didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the words flashed behind my eyelids like a warning light. They're not your parents, Mia. Pack a bag and leave. By morning, I had convinced myself it had to be a mistake, maybe a cruel prank, maybe Ethan trying to mess with me one last time. But when I went downstairs for breakfast, the unease returned the moment I saw them. Mom was humming, making pancakes like always. Dad sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. On the surface, it looked normal, the same warm, comfortable home I'd grown up in. But once you start looking for cracks, you can't stop seeing them. Morning, sweetheart, Mom said, flipping a pancake. Sleep well? Yeah, I lied, grabbing a mug. Just a little tired. Dad didn't look up. You've got that big presentation today, right? I froze mid-pour. I hadn't told him about that. I hadn't told either of them. Yeah, I said slowly. How did you? He finally met my eyes and smiled faintly. You mentioned it last week. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed Mom's phone buzzing on the counter. That same name. She turned quickly and silenced it, pretending not to notice. But I caught the flash of guilt in her eyes before she plastered on her perfect smile. My hands tightened around the mug. I wanted to ask. God, I wanted to ask. But what would I even say? Hey Mom, why are you texting my ex-boyfriend under a secret initial? Instead, I said nothing. And that silence? It became my new habit. Over the next few days, the red flags multiplied like cracks in a mirror. One afternoon, I came home early from work. Dad's car was gone, but I heard voices in the living room. Mom's and another man's. I froze in the hallway, listening. Mom's tone was sharp, whispering, "No, not yet. She doesn't suspect anything. I'll make sure she stays calm." The man said something low, too quiet to catch. Then Mom's voice softened. "Fine. But after this, we're done. I promised him." I backed away before they could notice me, heart hammering in my chest. When I came back 10 minutes later, the living room was empty and the house smelled like her favorite candle, the one she only lit when she wanted to hide something. The next morning, Dad handed me an envelope before I left for work. "Thought you might need this," he said casually. It was filled with cash. "Why?" I asked, confused. "I didn't ask for money." "Just take it," he said, tone clipped. "Consider it, for emergencies." Something about the way he said emergencies made my skin crawl. I shoved it into my bag, muttering a thank you, but my thoughts were racing. They were hiding something. I could feel it now. And that text, the warning to leave, it wasn't random. I tried to distract myself at work, but paranoia followed me everywhere. Every phone vibration made me jump. Every coworker who looked at me too long felt like they knew something I didn't. At lunch, my phone buzzed again. "Unknown number, you didn't leave." That was a mistake. I nearly dropped it. My stomach flipped. I typed back with shaking fingers. "Who are you? What's going on?" No response. That night, I confronted Mom, sort of. We were folding laundry in the living room when I said, "You've been on your phone a lot lately." She smiled. "Work stuff, mostly." "Who's he?" The color drained from her face for half a second before she laughed. "Oh, just a coworker. Evelyn. She's been driving me crazy with scheduling." Her voice was calm, convincing even, but I saw the tremor in her hands as she folded a towel. I wanted to press harder, but Dad came in, ending the conversation. Later, I found the family photo album sitting open on the dining table. It was odd Mom never left it out. She was obsessive about keeping it in perfect order, tucked away in the cabinet. I flipped through it absent-mindedly, until I stopped on a picture from my 10th birthday. Me, in a pink dress. Mom and Dad behind me, smiling. But what caught my attention wasn't their faces, it was the date written on the back in Mom's handwriting. June 2008, Mia turns 10. Except my birth certificate, the one I'd used for school forms 100 times, said I was born in 2007. The next morning, I pretended to go to work but instead drove to the park. I sat in my car, scrolling through my contacts, debating who I could even trust. That's when another message came through. Unknown number, you've started to see it, haven't you? The lies. The inconsistencies. Don't let them know you're suspicious. I'm watching. You'll have proof soon. I looked around the empty parking lot, every shadow suddenly suspicious. Someone was watching me. Someone who knew more about my life, my parents, than I did. That night, when I came home, Mom hugged me tighter than usual. Her perfume was overwhelming, and her voice had that brittle sweetness again. You know I'd do anything for you, right? I forced a smile. Of course. But in my mind, the same thought kept echoing like a warning bell. If she's lying about this, what else is she hiding? By the time the weekend came, I was living in two worlds. On the surface, I was the same old Mia showing up to Sunday brunch, smiling when Mom called me her baby girl, pretending everything was fine. But underneath, I was unraveling. Every word they said now felt like a test. Every smile looked rehearsed. And that text, "They're not your parents," refused to leave my mind. I needed answers. Sunday morning, Dad told me he was heading out for a quick errand. I watched from the upstairs window as he got into his car and drove away, but instead of turning toward town, he went the opposite direction. Toward the old storage facility by the highway. I grabbed my keys and followed. The drive felt endless, my thoughts a storm of what-ifs. When I got there, I parked far enough not to be seen. Dad unlocked one of the units, stepped inside, and shut the door. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, curiosity crushed caution. I crept closer, pressed my ear to the cold metal door, and froze at the sound of voices, two of them. Dad's. And Ethan's. I almost couldn't breathe. Ethan's voice was lower, angrier than I remembered. You said it would be transferred by now. Dad hissed, keep your voice down. She's suspicious as it is. Transferred? What was he talking about? Then Ethan said something that made my blood run cold. I risked everything getting that money out of her account. If she finds out before the papers are finalized. She won't, Dad interrupted. Once the adoption record is sealed, she'll have no legal claim to the inheritance anyway. Adoption record. Inheritance. The words echoed in my skull like gunshots. I stumbled back, hand over my mouth, trying not to make a sound. Adoption record? Inheritance? Her account? I wasn't just betrayed. I was used. When Dad finally left, I waited until his car disappeared down the road. Then I approached the unit, hands trembling, and peeked through the small window on the side. Inside were stacks of boxes, folders, and a safe. One folder sat open on a table, papers spilling out. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized a seal, the same one that had been on my late grandmother's estate documents. It clicked then. Grandma. Before she passed, she'd left everything to me: the house, her jewelry, her savings. My parents had called it her way of securing my future. Except I never saw any of it. They told me the estate was delayed in probate. That lawyers were handling it. But now, I knew the truth. They'd stolen it. My parents. I drove home numb. The world looked the same: the neat hedges, the white porch swing, but everything felt like a lie now. When I stepped inside, Mom was at the kitchen counter, cutting fruit like she had every morning of my life. Hey, sweetheart, she chirped, too bright. You're up early. I stared at her. At the woman who tucked me in at night, kissed scraped knees, whispered I love yous that now felt rehearsed. Finally, I said, how long were you planning to keep lying to me? Her knife froze mid-air. Mia, what? I know, I said, voice trembling. I know I'm not your daughter. I know about the money. I heard Dad and Ethan. The color drained from her face completely. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy, suffocating, alive. Then she whispered, you weren't supposed to find out like this. My chest tightened. So it's true. Tears welled in her eyes. You were so young, Mia. We wanted to protect you. Protect me? You stole from me. My voice broke. You let me grow up believing you were my real parents. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Your grandmother wanted to give everything to you, she said softly. But we were drowning in debt. Your father thought. Don't you dare blame him, I snapped. You both decided this. Her voice cracked. We raised you. We gave you everything. No, I whispered. You took everything. She sank into a chair, face in her hands. You don't understand. If we hadn't done it, Ethan would have. Would have what? I demanded. Before she could answer, Dad's car pulled into the driveway. Mom's eyes widened. Mia, please. Let's talk about this later. No, I said, gripping my phone. I'm done pretending. When Dad walked in, I confronted him right there. How could you do this to me? He blinked, expression unreadable. What did she tell you? I know everything, I said. The inheritance. The lies. That I'm not your daughter. For the first time in my life, he didn't look angry, he looked afraid. Who told you? He demanded. It doesn't matter, I said. I'm going to the police. His jaw tightened. You're not going anywhere. That's when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, they're desperate now. Get out before they stop you. I looked up. Both of them were staring at me, too still, too calm. Mom rose slowly. Sweetheart, you don't understand what's happening. But I did. And for the first time in my life, I was truly terrified of the people who had raised me. I backed toward the door, heart racing. Stay away from me. Dad's voice was low. If you walk out that door, don't come back. Good, I said. Because this house stopped being home the moment you decided to betray me. I ran. Out the door, down the street, into my car shaking, crying, furious. As I drove away, another message appeared on my screen. Unknown number, now you know. But this goes deeper than you think. I glanced in the mirror. And for a split second I swore I saw a dark car following me. I drove for hours that night, aimless, half blind through tears, headlights streaking across my windshield like ghosts. Every mile that passed, I whispered the same question over and over. Why me? The people who tucked me into bed, who called themselves my parents, had been lying my entire life. I wasn't their daughter. My real grandmother had left me everything and they'd stolen it all. The betrayal burned like fire under my skin. By the time I finally stopped at a deserted gas station on the edge of town, I felt hollow. I sat in my car, engine off, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Who was I now? My phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. You're safe for now. Go to the locker at Redwood Station. Code 4927. I hesitated, but something told me to listen. That same instinct that had made me hide my shaking hands at dinner, that whispered to me when the truth first started to crack through the lies. I drove there, heart pounding, headlights cutting through fog. Redwood Station was nearly empty, just a few flickering lights and the hum of vending machines. The lockers lined the wall in perfect rows, each dull gray and anonymous. When I entered 4927, the lock clicked open. Inside was a brown envelope with my name written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Missing in action. I opened it. Inside were documents, birth records, legal forms, and photos. One was of me as a baby, cradled by a woman I didn't recognize. She had soft eyes and dark curls like mine. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, it read: My sweet girl, if anything happens to me, find Ethan. He'll protect you. Ethan. My ex. My supposed betrayer. The man who had vanished without explanation, and the same one my parents were secretly working with. Except, maybe they weren't working with him. Maybe they were working against him. I pulled out one more paper, a legal adoption certificate. My name. My fake parents' names. And one word scribbled across the bottom in blue ink. Forgery. My whole world tilted. So it was true. Everything. They'd forged documents to make me their daughter. They'd stolen my inheritance and maybe even hidden me from the truth about who I was. But suddenly, anger started to outweigh fear. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I'd spent the last 24 hours crying, running, and hiding, but sitting there under those buzzing station lights, I realized something powerful. They had taken my life, but I could take it back. That moment was my turning point. I wiped my tears and looked at my reflection in the locker's metal door. My voice shook when I whispered, "No more running." If Ethan had been trying to protect me, I needed to find him. If my fake parents thought they could erase my identity and steal my future, I'd expose them every lie, every secret, every dollar they'd taken. But first, I needed proof. Solid evidence. So I went back. By midnight, I was parked down the street from the house I grew up in. Every window was dark except one Dad's office. I remembered where he kept his safe. He'd shown me once, years ago, boasting about responsibility and trust. Now I'd use that trust against him. I slipped through the side gate, heart racing, flashlight in hand. My old key still worked. Inside, the air was heavy with silence. Every creak of the floorboards made my pulse jump. In Dad's office, I found the safe same as I remembered. Code, 1982. His birth year. He was predictable that way. The lock clicked open. Inside cash, documents, and a small black flash drive labeled estate transfers. Bingo. I pocketed it and turned to leave, but then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, good. You found it. Now don't go home. Not yet. I froze. Whoever this was, they knew everything. I texted back quickly. Who are you? Why are you helping me? No reply. I drove to a motel on the edge of town and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The files loaded slowly, each one confirming what I feared: bank statements, transfers from my grandmother's account to my parents, and even forged signatures from a lawyer named Carter Doyle. They'd drained every cent before I'd even turned 18. I sat there, staring at the screen, shaking with anger, not fear this time, but something deeper, sharper. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They'd stolen me. My name, my bloodline, my truth. And I wasn't going to let them win. I made a list. Names. Dates. Accounts. Then I called the only person who might still be on my side, my grandmother's old lawyer, whose number I found in one of the documents. He answered groggily. Hello. I took a breath. Mr. Doyle, this is Mia. Eleanor's granddaughter. There was silence. Then a low exhale. I was wondering when you'd find me. My heart pounded. You knew. Yes, he said. And if you've called me, it means the truth's finally come out. His voice grew grim. But you're not safe, Mia. They won't let you expose them easily. I hung up, staring out the motel window at the dark highway. For the first time, I wasn't scared of them anymore. Let them try to stop me. I'd been the scared little girl who did what her parents told her to, who smiled through the lies. But not anymore. They built this web of deceit. I was going to tear it apart piece by piece. I looked at the text thread one last time, at that first message that started it all. Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents. For the first time, I understood. That message wasn't a warning. It was a second chance. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I turned the motel desk into a war room, laptop open, flash drive plugged in, printed bank statements spread like crime scene photos. For the first time since I'd discovered the truth, my panic had a shape. It was a plan. If they'd stolen my life, I was going to take everything back, but not by shouting. By outsmarting them. Quietly. Precisely. Like a surgeon removing a tumor. I wrote the plan down and numbered the steps. Having them in order calmed me. It also gave me control. Step 1: secure legal cover. I called Mr. Doyle again, this time with a list of questions and the flash drive details. He promised to put a freeze on any pending estate transfers he could, and to issue an urgent letter to the banks if I handed over the documents. More importantly, he agreed to act as counsel if we needed subpoenas or immediate police involvement. I couldn't bring the cops in yet, not until I had absolute proof and a way to prevent them from burning the evidence. Mr. Doyle would be the legal hammer. Step 2: make the paper trail airtight. The files on the flash drive showed transfers, forged signatures, and a fake adoption. That was raw gold, but lawyers and banks loved originals. I photographed every document, created backups, and asked Mr. Doyle to open a secure legal folder. Then I set up a burner email to start sending anonymous tips under the guise of a concerned third party with leads about the estate. The goal: watch how they reacted. If they tried to move money, I'd have timestamps showing premeditation. Step 3: digital forensics. Forgery leaves digital fingerprints, modified PDFs, saved metadata, timestamps. Mr. Doyle connected me with a forensic analyst who could verify the forged adoption and trace the lawyer's supposed signature back to digital edits. If the documents were officially proven forged, the legal case would collapse their narrative. I shipped copies overnight to the analyst and asked for a signed report, something no family argument could shrug off. Step 4: Create a controlled leak. You don't pull a tiger from its cage with your bare hands. You bait it. I crafted a believable story leaked through the burner email and anonymous tip lines suggesting there was an interested buyer for Grandma's jewelry and a scheduled handover at a neutral location. The idea was to make whoever had the items move them. If they moved them, we could intercept with law enforcement waiting. If they didn't, that was telling, too. Either way, it forced action and revealed allies. Step 5: Emotional bait. I needed them to show themselves. So I played the part I'd rehearsed at dinner for years, the hurt, the naive, the forgiving daughter. I started returning some calls, answered with a softer voice in texts, and let them believe I was spiraling. People who are guilty often talk too much when they think they're safe. I let them think their web still held me. Step 6: Record everything. I set up my phone to auto-record calls. I carried a small voice recorder in my pocket, and when I thought I could get a safe conversation, Mr. Doyle arranged for an interview room at his office where a neutral third party could witness statements. I couldn't force a confession, but I could force inconsistency, and with the analyst's timeline, any contradiction would look damning. Step 7: The public lever. Law, evidence, and police could do the heavy lifting, but reputations mattered to them. A threat of exposure to the family's social circle, word of an upcoming civil suit, and the right whisper to the bank manager would make them nervous. I wasn't ready to go public yet, but I made a list of reporters and community influencers who'd bite if the story smelled of fraud and betrayal. Reputation is often the faster way to make a guilty person act rashly. For days I moved like a shadow. I mailed the anonymous tip, watched my parents' routines from a distance, and fed Mr. Doyle more evidence. The forensic report came back within 72 hours, forged signatures, altered metadata, and a clear path showing the documents were created on a home computer. It was everything I'd prayed for. But knowing didn't mean they were powerless. If anything, they moved faster. Dad started leaving the house more often, and Mom's texts to E increased. The anonymous tip triggered a reaction just as I'd hoped, a flurry of small transactions, a late-night meeting at a storage unit, the same pattern Dad had used before. The villain still felt in control, confident that their old tricks would work. That was the danger. Their confidence made them reckless. Their arrogance would be my edge. One night, a message from the unknown number arrived. Good. They're nervous. Don't let them see you. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. the buyer meets at Harbor 3. Be there. My hands went cold and then steady. Everything was aligning: the leak, the intercepted transactions, the forensic report, Mr. Doyle ready with a legal injunction if needed. I slept for 2 hours and drove to Harbor 3 before sunrise to stake out the area. The traps were set: legal, digital, and public, and now it was only a matter of who would take the bait. As dawn bled into the city, I watched the harbor lights and felt something that wasn't fear. It was the grim, satisfying hum of someone who had turned pain into purpose. They still believed they were pulling all the strings. They were wrong. The trap was primed. The climax was coming. The night felt electric, like a held breath before thunder. I arrived at Harbor 3 before dusk, Mr. Doyle and 2 plainclothes detectives in the passenger seats. Ethan was there, leaning against a crate as if he'd been waiting his whole life to watch a lie unravel. He nodded once when I joined them. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were steady. The unknown number texts had been his. He'd been the shadow that pushed me toward the truth. We were a small, quiet storm. The harbor smelled of salt and diesel. Mist coiled around the lamps as alone figures shuffled down the gangway at 7:00 p.m. Dad, looking too stiff in a suit, and Mom beside him with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Behind them walked a man carrying a battered black case, the buyer. I felt nothing but cold focus, every nerve was taut. The plan was surgical: let them make the exchange on camera, then move. The detectives pretended to be late. I kept my phone on record. Mr. Doyle had wired up an evidence feed to a tablet he'd set nearby. The forensic analyst's report was already loaded. If they tried to lie, we'd have the truth in black and white. The buyer opened the case. Jewelry, glinting under the harbor lights. The buyer inspected it, nodded, and handed over an envelope. Dad's fingers brushed the money, and then the crucial mistake: he slipped a small flash drive from his pocket into the buyer's hand. A tiny, stupid motion, but the camera caught it. Ethan stepped forward like a man closing a book. "Don't do this," he said, voice flat. "You can still stop." Dad's laugh was brittle. "You don't get to talk, Ethan." Mom smiled at me then, a smile that used to mean bedtime stories, now a grin of calculation. "Mia, sweetheart. We can fix this." I swallowed the bile. "Fix? By stealing my grandma's life." "Everything was for you," Mom lied, too fast. "We thought." That was the moment the detectives cut in. Headlights flared, a small team spilled from a car. One officer called out, "Harbor Police. This area is cordoned. Everyone stay where you are." Dad's face went white. He bolted. The buyer ducked behind a crate. Mom tried to run, but Ethan caught her arm and held her like a man who'd been holding himself back for years. The camera on my phone never wavered. "What's this about?" Dad barked, panic cracking his voice. Detective Doyle, no relation to Mr. Doyle, held up a warrant. "Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, you're under arrest for grand larceny, fraud, and conspiracy to commit forgery. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Neighbors who frequented the harbor had gathered. Someone's flashlight illuminated the scene like a stage. A man started filming on his phone. Within minutes, the first clip was already uploading, the old world shame detonating into the new world blast of public exposure. Mom slapped Ethan's hand away and turned to me with fury. "You set us up." "I set myself free," I said. The words felt delicate and dangerous in my mouth. "You stole my life." "They cuffed Dad first." He shouted, small and sputtering, that he'd done it all for me. Mom tried to bargain, voice rising into hysteria, offering anything, money, the house, her apologies, anything to stop what was coming. The detectives ignored her pleas. They had the forensic report ready. Mr. Doyle fed the bank records to the lead officer's tablet. The forged adoption certificates, metadata, timestamps, the altered PDFs, the paper trail of transfers, everything lined up like the teeth of a trap. When they read parts of the report out loud, neighbors gasped. "They made you their daughter," someone muttered. "They took everything." The murmur grew into a roar of betrayal and disbelief. At one point Dad lunged, trying to grab the case with the jewelry, but an officer's hand pinned him down. The harbor scene had the rhythm of a movie, flashing lights, a guilty man on the ground, a woman pleading with the moonlight reflecting off stolen gems. I watched, hollow and fierce, as the people who taught me to say grace were led away in handcuffs. By morning, the video had 2 million views. A local station ran a late-night segment with the headline, "Beloved Parents Arrested in Inheritance Fraud." The bank accounts my parents used were frozen. An emergency probate case was filed. Mr. Doyle moved fast, petitioning the court to restore the estate and place the assets in a protective trust for me. Carter Doyle's fabricated signatures were under legal scrutiny. The forensics showed digital edits and timestamps that matched my parents' home computer usage. But the real blow was reputation. Our cul-de-sac woke up to whispers. The PDA group text exploded. "The woman who'd borrowed sugar from my mother a week ago sent a message, I can't believe it." The community that once embraced our family looked at the Holloways like strangers. Dad called me from jail on the third day, voice hoarse. "Mia, you don't understand." "I understand enough," I said. "You took everything that belonged to me. I'm getting it back." Mom's name trended on social media for reasons she never would have imagined when she slipped that forged certificate into a file years ago. People made memes. The local jeweler who'd appraised Grandma's collection testified in a recorded statement. The buyer turned out to be an informant who'd helped the police set up the sting. As the courtroom dates were scheduled and criminal charges filed, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. The rage that had fueled me through sleepless nights was shifting into something steadier, the slow, cold satisfaction of justice aligning with truth. Standing on the harbor's edge later, the lights behind me, I watched the tide take away the small, discarded pieces of my old life, a receipt here, a crushed cigarette box there. The city hummed. People walked past, unaware of the private wreckage we'd all witnessed. Ethan stood beside me, not touching, just there. "You did good," he said, quietly. "You warned me," I replied. He shrugged, and for the first time since this began, his face softened. "You listened." The harbor lights reflected off the water, and for once, the reflection matched the truth. The lie that had wrapped itself around my childhood had been cut open, bleeding out its secrets for all to see. The climactic fall had happened and it was exactly as dramatic as I'd imagined, public, irreversible, and utterly deserved. The morning after the sentencing felt eerily quiet, like the world had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The courtroom was nearly empty now, the echoes of my parents' outbursts fading into memory. The verdict had been brutal but just. Dad got 8 years for fraud and theft. Mom, who'd orchestrated the adoption forgery, received 6. The judge called their actions a profound corruption of parental trust. I called it karma in slow motion. They had spent years shaping me into their perfect puppet, smiling in family photos, preaching about honesty at dinner tables while lying through their teeth. But when the gavel came down, the truth finally had a voice: mine. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I stood in the courthouse hallway, sunlight pouring through the tall glass panes, and realized something strange. I felt clean. For the first time in my life, I didn't carry their secrets. I didn't owe anyone my silence. Mr. Doyle walked up beside me, handing me a set of papers, the final documents restoring my inheritance. It's officially yours now, Mia. Every last cent. I looked down at the signatures, the seal, the bold letters that read Estate of Eleanor Holloway. My grandmother's name. The woman they'd erased. It was like she was finally seen again through me. Ethan leaned against the wall nearby, hands in his pockets. Told you, he said softly. You'd win. I gave him a tired smile. Winning feels weird. That's because you fought with truth, not revenge. He was right. Somewhere between anger and justice, I'd changed. The girl who used to beg for her parents' approval had become the woman who stood against them. The town changed, too. For months, everyone whispered about the Holloway case, the perfect family that wasn't. Their house went up for sale. Nobody wanted it. The curtains stayed drawn, the mailbox stuffed with unopened flyers. It became a symbol of greed and of me walking away from it. I used part of my inheritance to start a foundation in my grandmother's name, the Eleanor Fund. It offered legal aid to foster kids and young adults dealing with guardianship fraud or inheritance exploitation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had stolen from a legacy, and now that legacy would protect others. News outlets ran follow-up stories about the case. One headline read, "Daughter exposes parents' web of lies, turns pain into purpose." Another called me the woman who refused to stay silent. I never corrected them. Because silence had been my biggest mistake. One day, about 6 months later, I got a letter. It was from Mom. I stared at the envelope for hours before opening it. Inside was a single page, written in her neat cursive. We did what we thought was best. Maybe one day you'll understand. Love, Mom. There was no apology. No remorse. Just the same twisted justification that had poisoned everything. I burned it. Slowly. The paper curled and blackened in the sink, the ashes washing away. That was the day I stopped waiting for closure from them, because sometimes, the only closure you get is the one you create. A week later, I returned to the harbor, the same spot where everything had fallen apart. The air smelled of salt and rain, the sky streaked orange and pink. I stood at the edge, watching the waves roll in, each one erasing traces of what had been. Ethan joined me, quiet as always. What now? He asked. I smiled faintly. Now I live. Not for them. For me. He nodded, and for the first time, I laughed, really laughed. Not the polite kind I used to force at family dinners, but a full, unfiltered sound that felt like freedom. The water shimmered with sunset light, and I whispered to myself, justice isn't loud. Sometimes, it's just peaceful. I walked away from the harbor that night without looking back. Because some stories don't need revisiting, they just need to end. But I left one thing behind, a single silver locket, engraved with my grandmother's initials, cast into the sea. It wasn't loss anymore. It was release. And maybe that's poetic justice, not watching them suffer, but watching myself finally heal. Because the people who tried to bury me forgot I was the seed. Seedling. Movie camera to everyone watching this. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? Did you ever have to rebuild from the ashes they left behind? Tell me your story in the comments, someone out there might need to hear it. If you believe in karma, in truth rising no matter how deep it's buried, hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more real justice moments. Because sometimes, silence isn't golden. It's just the sound of lies waiting to be exposed.